The time, yes, the time has come today for an all-analog Audiophiliac, because I'm going to review not one, but two turntables, both made by Technics, starting with the SL1500C and also the SL1200GR. But wait, there is more. I'm going to include two phono preamps, the Schiit Mani and also the MoFi StudioPhono, and a bunch of cartridges. So, I've been meaning to do this for a while, to start reviewing more and more turntables here on the channel. And it seemed like these were the obvious places to start. And though I am more of a belt drive kind of guy, belt drive turntable, I thought, Technics, they kind of own the direct drive, affordable direct drive category. So yeah, these two seem like a great place to start. They feel more solid just in terms of their construction than a typical Riga or a Project belt drive turntables. This has some weight to it. So one of the things that distinguishes the 1500C is, unlike most of the other Technics turntables, it doesn't look like a DJ turntable. It doesn't have the slider, it doesn't have the strobe. It's just a very clean looking table. It also has a built-in phono preamp. It comes with a pre-mounted Ortofon 2M red cartridge. You don't have to be there at the end of the side of a record. The arm lifts automatically. Because of the detachable head shell, it's so easy to change cartridges. As a matter of fact, I have a bunch here. So I could just swap between the cartridges. And you can't do that with a Riga, and you can't do that with most projects as far as I know. That has its appeal to me, and obviously lots of other audiophiles. One of the other really nice things about the 1500C is it's the least expensive turntable in the Technics line. It is $1,199. Now, of course, the SL1200GR does look like a DJ turntable, and by the way, it is more expensive. It's $1,699. It doesn't have the auto lift, it doesn't have the built-in phono preamp, it doesn't come with a pre-mounted cartridge, but it does feel a little more solidly put together. The platter is a little heavier. It's actually 5.5 pounds versus 4.5 for the 1500C. One of the things that I have to point out here is when you play records, it's a hands-on operation, right? You touch the turntable to use the turntable. You don't touch speakers or amplifiers to use them. They're just there. But when you play records, you got to interact with your turntable. And that was one of the things I liked better about the 1200 versus the 1500 is the cueing device just felt more secure, raising and lowering the arm. It just felt a little better than the 1500C. So I gravitated towards the 1200GR. The other thing I really like about the 1200 over the 1500C is the VTA adjustment, meaning the height of the arm relative to the platter, because when you change cartridges, you may have to change the height of the arm. Now, in the 1500C, you basically release the lock that holds the arm in place vertically, and you can raise and lower the arm, but you have no idea exactly how much you're going up or down at any given time. You just have to raise it or lower it and see where you are, and then adjust accordingly. But on the 1200GR, you actually can control it exactly. You know how far you're going up and how far you're going down. So it actually makes fine-tuning a lot easier on the 1200GR. So if you're the kind of audiophile that's going to change cartridges, that difference for the GR is worth considering, because I think it's very significant. So I don't want to forget to just throw this into the mix, because I know that some people will be asking, so which is the better sounding turntable? Assuming they both had the same cartridge, which they didn't when I was comparing them. Which would be the better sounding model? I don't know. I don't know. I would say, just living with them, they sound pretty much the same. So I think the 1500C looks nicer, but I felt the touchy-feely parts of living with the 1200GR, it felt better in my hands. So I gravitated towards the GR model. My journey over this review contained many zigs and zags, because there were many changes to as I was configuring the turntables, right? But I started with the dead stock Technics SL 1500C with the stock Ortofon 2M red cartridge and the built-in phono preamp. I played records. I enjoyed the sound of the records. I did not find it to be, well, the ultimate in analog experiences. It wasn't the ultimate in just fun and engagement. It sounded good, but I wouldn't want to stop there. Well, mostly because I am the audiophiliac, but I knew that these changes that I had in store, first with upgrading the phono preamp, would make significant differences. So I listened to just get a sort of a baseline with the 2M red and the built-in phono preamp, and they were fine. And I'm sure many people who buy the 1500C, who aren't audiophiles, they just want a nice turntable to play records on, you're good. So what I did is, the very first change I made, because I was itching to make, was to switch over to the Schiit Mani phono preamp, which is, I think, $129. And I can't say the difference was dramatic, but the difference was there in terms of the life of the music itself. It just had a little more get up and go with the Schiit Mani, more compared to using the built-in phono preamp. So sure, for 129 bucks, definitely a worthy upgrade. The next change, which was also very logical, was to swap out the 2M red and pop in a 2M blue, an Ortofon 2M blue. That was a bigger change, because the 2M blue is definitely a better cartridge than the red. It just has more life to it. There's more detail, more clarity, bass is tighter. Pretty much everything got better with the blue. So again, a good starting point. The next change, which was to swap out the Schiit Mani for the MoFi StudioPhono preamp. By the way, they both do moving magnet and moving coil. And these are moving magnet cartridges at this stage. And that was the biggest upgrade of all so far, was the StudioPhono is a much better phono preamp. The Schiit Mani is best quality is it's inoffensive, doesn't do anything wrong, but it does lack vigor. The upgrading the phono preamp can make a difference. In fact, I would say upgrading the phono preamp is at least as important as changing the cartridge. So if you're really going to get into this playing records and enjoying vinyl and analog, getting a good turntable, absolutely. That's where it all begins. And getting a good cartridge is really important. But the phono preamp is not to be, you don't want to forget that part. It's critically important to get a really good phono preamp. You know, in the coming months, I'm going to review more phono preamps. I certainly intend to. $500, $600, $1,000. But for $350, the MoFi StudioPhono is awfully good. So the next big change was to change cartridges. Now, from here forward, I'm only going to be using the SL1200GR turntable. But the cartridge change from the 2M blue to the MoFi MasterTracker moving magnet cartridge, that was a big one. That was a big one on a number of levels, starting with the price. It is an $800 cartridge, but it's made in Japan. The body is a solid, milled from solid aluminum piece. I mean, it's gorgeous, it's cool, and it's chunky, and it looks like it means business. And in fact, it does. It's extremely dynamic. It's very, very powerful sounding. It is alive sounding. It just kicks butt. And I was playing this Malcolm McLaren record from, I guess, the 80s, his version of Madame Butterfly. And it's rock. It's funny. It's got some pulse to it. And it also has an opera singer, or a woman that sounds like an opera singer to me. And when she enters the song, because this was a 12-inch 45 that I was playing. When she enters, she just takes over the room. She's like, oh yes, there is a real live singer right there. And I was having a really, really, really good time. The MasterTracker is definitely a force to be reckoned with. At this point, I wanted to go a little classical, but not with music, but with a cartridge. There is this cartridge made by Denon. It's the DL103. It has been, or it started its production run in 1962 basically as a cartridge designed for radio disc jockeys for the Japanese radio network. And it somehow caught the attention of a lot of audiophiles, and it became an audiophile darling. And it's still here, and it's still really good. And it might even still actually be made in Japan. And it's not a terribly expensive cartridge. It's $349 last time I checked. It's a big chunky body, but it is plastic. It's a moving coil cartridge. So with that, I was changing the settings on the MoFi Phono preamp to adjust it to be used with moving coil cartridges. Although, actually, initially, I played the 103 in the moving magnet section of that phono preamp, and it sounded fine. It definitely did. So even if you don't have a moving coil phono preamp, you probably can get away with using the 103 in a moving magnet phono preamp. But it did sound a bit better when I switched over to the higher gain and adjusted the impedance accordingly for the 103. But that cartridge is not like the MasterTracker. It is not explosive. It is not powerful sounding. It's just actually kind of gentle sounding, very engaging, well, more laid back, certainly, than the MasterTracker. But, you know, it's amazing that I've gotten to this stage of my audiophile life without having lived with a 103, because it's always been there. And it was one of those, I want to get one of those. I want to live with one of those. And now, at least for a little while, I am, because it is on loan. I'm living with the 103, and I get why it's lasted all of these years. The next cartridge swap was to the Zoo Denon 103. In other words, Zoo, the speaker company, modifies Denon 103s and basically changes the body and does some not gigantic changes internally, but it's a different cartridge. It's a more expensive cartridge. And that one, it had a lot of course, of what the 103 sounds like, but more amped up, a little more juice to it, a little more kick to the bottom. I wouldn't say these are gigantic changes between the standard 103 and the Zoo 103, but the Zoo 103 is definitely the better sounding, better meaning a higher resolving model. You just get more detail and clarity out of the groove with the Zoo Denon 103. The next cartridge swap was to go to a Grado. Now, Grado is a local company to me. They're based here in Brooklyn. They make their cartridges and headphones here in Brooklyn. I didn't want to include a crazy expensive Grado. I didn't want to use a really cheap Grado. So I wound up getting the Grado Reference Platinum 2. This is not the current model. I couldn't get my hands on that one just yet, but it will happen hopefully in a month or so. But I wanted to include it in today's video. So I used the Reference Platinum 2. And first of all, it's a heavy cartridge, and it mounted in a heavy head shell, so it took some fiddling in terms of balancing out the arm. But I did. And that cartridge, you know what? In some ways, that is my favorite cartridge of all the ones I use, because it's bold, it's rich, it's very powerful sounding, but not intensely detailed. It is not a high-res design. It is not the most dynamic cartridge. It's a cruiser is what it is. It pushes its weight around. But in terms of the fun factor of analog, I think that Grado, and probably the current version is a bit better than this one that I have right now. That one, the Reference Platinum 2, yeah, that one made me smile a lot. You know, one of the best parts about living with a turntable is that it's easy to change the sound. You change the cartridge, you change the sound. You know, you change the phono preamp, you change the sound. So you're not going to get bored. You're not going to get bored with the sound because you could always swap something out there. And by the way, what the turntable is actually resting upon. Now I have it on this bamboo shelf on top of sorbethane feet. If I swapped out the shelf, it would change the sound of the turntable to some degree. So the tweakability of turntables is a really big deal. Maybe that's one of the reasons they've sustained so long. So I think this one, the Technics SL 1200 GR, is going to stick around here, I hope for a few months at least, because I want to use it as a test bed to swap out cartridges and listen to different phono preamps, and that's, I hope, comes to pass. I have another turntable in the pipeline to review, but I don't want to say it because things have a habit of falling through, especially now with supply chain issues really slowing down production. I'm never sure what I'm going to get until I get it. So that's it. But I gotta say, I had a really good time doing this, all these swapping things. Now, as I was doing it, these are not in-depth reviews of anything really. And the SL1200 and the 1500C, they've been out for years. They are not new turntables. I'm just adding my feelings and my opinions to the mix that's already out there. They're well-established designs. And like I said, if you're an audiophile and you've only lived with belt drive turntables, which I'm not putting down at all, but if you've only lived with belt drive turntables and you're deep into the vinyl groove thing, you should consider getting a direct drive like the 1200 or the 1500C. And guess what? Now it is that special time for the Audiophiliac viewer system of the day. Let's put it this way. This is a very DIY intensive system. And it comes from Glenn, and he is in Dandridge, Tennessee. Turntable isn't DIY. It's a VPI HW19 with a Zeta tone arm, and the cartridge is a Sumiko Bluepoint Special. The phono preamp is DIY. It's from Salis. It's an Ultra FSP RI AA. There's a record cleaning machine in there. It's a VPI HW16.5. Back to DIY, the preamp itself is DIY. It's a Salis DCG3 line and headphone. DAC is a Bifrost 2 that comes from Schiit. Now, for the subwoofers, those are 160 watt mono DIY amplifiers. The power amp for the speakers themselves comes from DIYaudio.com, and it's a Sony VFET. It was designed by Nelson Pass. It's completely sold out. The subwoofers are from Audio Concepts, and each one has a pair of 12-inch woofers in a push-pull configuration. There's an electronic crossover, which is DIY, and it's called a Biamp 624. The speakers themselves, those towers, are DIY from Speaker Design Works. They are the Centaurians. Glenn, that is a very impressive system. Okay, we are back, and my name is Steve Guttenberg, and you are watching the Audiophiliac Show. If you like what I'm doing here on the channel, yes, please give me a thumbs up. And also, if you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you're a subscriber and you're giving me lots of likes, the next step is to check out the Patreon. The Patreon can be found at patreon.com/audiophiliac. And now Patreon accepts payment in dollars, pounds, and euros, if that helps. Well, now I can say my work here is at last complete. Thank you again for watching, and I really, really do hope to see you back here again very, very soon. Bye-bye.